it was with a partner helping them get one.
Okay.
So it was a lot of work. My first all-nighter ever.
Ah.
I ran. That was not bad. But we got it done.
All right, we are live, so don't say anything you don't want people to hear. Don't worry, that will stop. I will put us on mute. It's good to know the volume is working well.
Who else is coming?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Do you think someone else is?
No, I don't think so. I think if anything, they'll be for the 4-H meeting. All right. Let's see. Your PowerPoint is a little hard to see. Do you mind if I try turning off the lights to see if that helps? It's pretty dark. Let's see what that looks like.
What's going on?
It looks okay for us, but I don't know if you now, Brian, will.
Can you zoom?
Oh, I'm fine. Don't worry about me.
Zoom in a little more once we get started, because then you can see me.
Oh, yes, we do. I need to see your beautiful face. We'll keep the light on.
I won't fall asleep, I promise.
I think it'll be fun with the light on.
This.
I'm going to be sitting right over there asking some questions, so. All right, looks good from here. Got your file here. So you're from Wisconsin originally?
Peoria, Illinois.
Oh, okay. Is Peoria like dead central?
It's a little north central. It's such a long state. It takes about 3 hours to get there.
From here?
From here, yeah.
Really?
Straight shot down 39.
Okay.
Well, you gotta cut over at some point. But.
I drove to New Orleans once and went through like Springfield. Is it anywhere near?
Yeah, it's north of Springfield.
Okay.
Rivertown.
What river is that?
Illinois.
I've never heard of the Illinois
Yeah,
River.
it's a big working river, a lot of barges.
Interesting. Does it go into the Mississippi?
You can actually get there from the O'Hara right here.
Really?
Yeah. You just go down the O'Hara to the Rock River, take the Rock River to the Mississippi, go down the Mississippi, and go up to Illinois.
Oh, funny. So wait, is the Illinois River the one that has a lot of electric dams because of carp? Is that?
There's a huge carp problem. I mean, it
Okay.
really ruined water skiing and other things.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the dams.
Okay. I lived in Chicago for a while, and that was like a hot topic that carp are going to get into Lake Michigan from some All right, it is 9 o'clock, so we can begin. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the October coffee break. I'm really excited we have Greg Lawless with us today. Greg is the Food Systems Development Program Manager within Cooperative Extension's Community Food Systems team. He has a master's degree in environmental resources from the Nelson Institute here at UW-Madison. He began working for the UW Center for Cooperatives as a graduate student in 1992. Co-directed the Ag Innovation Center from 2005 to 2010, and then transferred to UW Extension in 2008. Let's see. Before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items. If at any point the internet connection starts to go bad, please feel free to call into the WISP line. The phone number for that WISP line was sent in the email I sent this morning. The coffee break will be recorded and posted to the Funding Resource Hub's website following the event. And I also want to make a quick plug for our upcoming coffee breaks. Next month, we have Chris Andrews, who is a federal relations specialist with UW System. She will join us to discuss federal budget trends and what her office does for UW campuses. And then in December, we will have a recorded webinar from our pre-award specialist, Suzanne Samuelson. And she will discuss topics in pre-award, including award terms and conditions. And I'm always working on bringing in new and interesting speakers and topics, so please don't hesitate to contact me if you have an idea for a coffee break. So without further ado, let's welcome Greg.
Thank you, Nicole. Well, Nicole asked me to come here and just talk about my work getting and managing grants. And he also said to kind of talk about some of the ones I've had, or sort of tell the story of some of the ones I had. I think that was a good idea. I'm going to end with what I like about grants, what I don't like about grants, and some grant development tips. But I think going through some of these stories of past grants will make those tips more clear. So I titled it Developing and Managing Grants to Solve Problems. I don't like the term grant writer. It's just a third of what is involved maybe with putting together a grant. Grant developer makes more sense to me, or integrator, or whatever, facilitator. But then managing is the whole second half. You get the funding, and then you got to manage it. So you got to be careful what you wish for, or what you set yourself up for. Make sure you can pull it off. This is so I had a little bit of enjoyment going back and looking in old files and folders just for part of the day, and I found this directory with the really corny clip art from 1995 probably. And this was my first grant. And I put it in quotes because it really wasn't, I didn't actually submit a competitive proposal. This was a grant, a contract I worked out with a distributor, an organic produce distributor who was just south of Cottage Grove. And I guess I'll back up a little bit, because one of the things that I'm going to say, like tip number one is develop a strategy before you go after grants. And that process of developing a strategy can take several years. And in this case, it did. I moved to Wisconsin in 1991, August of 91. I was going to get a PhD in political science and deferred for a year so I could get in-state tuition. And while I was deferring, I got a job on an organic vegetable farm. It turned out to be kind of the premier diversified organic vegetable farm in the state, Harmony Valley Farm, out near Viroqua. And I'd work there 6 days a week, and on the seventh day or whatever, 5 days a week, on the seventh day we'd come to Madison for the farmers market, which at that time was already huge. I mean, the Dane County Farmers Market in 1991 was absolutely fully established, long waiting lists, thousands of people. And it was a long day. It was an 8-hour day of just exchanging money and food. And at the end of it, we'd go over to Lake Twal, a pretty famous restaurant in Wisconsin, and we'd have a lunch prepared for us. We were very informal by the owner, Odessa Piper, and we just would have conversations with her. And those conversations led to the problem, which the problem was there was clearly a demand for fresh produce, farm products. The market proved that. But Odessa, who just happened to be right across from the farm, could go over literally with a kid's wagon and fill it up with produce and take it back. And she was one of the first in the state, one of the earliest in the country to really make a whole restaurant out of using local, organic, sustainable produce and meat and everything else, and really telling the story about where she got that. She was really one of the first. Really, she sort of is at the cutting edge of local food. But not every restaurant can take a wagon to the market. And so the problem that we saw was that there's this gigantic growing demand for local, organic, sustainable food with a story, high quality, and yet there was no market infrastructure really to get it from the farms to the restaurants, grocery stores, etc. So we had we casually had these conversations, and eventually it led to the bare bones of a strategy. Richard, the owner of that farm, was kind of iffy on the strategy because he's a very independent guy, like most farmers, and the strategy seemed to need some kind of collaborative action. And so Richard sort of supported it a bit more. We had to reach out broader. And one thing we did was we developed this directory. We really just surveyed. We didn't just look for organic farms. We really looked for sustainable, which was still a pretty new word back then, a little bit controversial, a little bit broader than organic. And we we just reached out, through all our channels. Email was not very big back then, but through all our channels, we reached out, mail survey, and we put this directory together of all these amazing farms. And I have one copy left of this, and it's really cool to look through at some of these farms who are still in business. But that led to this next, a couple more grants. So we kind of had a strategy in place. We knew forming some sort of collaborative marketing entity was going to be needed. We didn't know whether we would target restaurants in Madison or grocery stores. We didn't know a lot. But we got another couple little grants, one for $10,000 from the State Department of Ag, a Sustainable Ag grant. And then that helped us reach out further to farms, get a better idea of what they wanted to do, what they had to sell. And then we got one more from the Department of Ag, an ADD grant, and that gave us enough of a oomph to actually form a business, a cooperative business with a board of directors and a manager. And so a total of 22,000, actually 23,000, counting the first grant, and enabled us to form this co-op. Small amount of money compared to what it eventually did. It was running at least until 2009. I kind of stepped away from it. I did my part. After a few years, I stepped away. Eventually, it was doing $500,000 a year in sales. And the thing with co-ops is they should only exist as long as they're needed. And at some point, the farmers came to a conclusion that they didn't need this co-op anymore. They could sell direct to the restaurants. Enough, the marketplace had matured enough to a point. Although, kind of ironically, I think a few years later, the state needed that co-op again because there was a need to get to grocery stores, to get to schools, et cetera. But by then, the co-op had dissolved, and they kind of had to reinvent a new approach. But I guess my point is, this was, we did our first sales in '96, so this was a 5-year project to get it from there to there, and it's a modest amount of money. There were more growers. There were Amish growers in the co-op. They didn't want to be in the picture. But it was really a great experience. But I wasn't personally satisfied with just getting raw products to restaurants and grocery stores, et cetera. I just knew that processing early on, I just felt like processing had to be part of this because it's a short growing season. How can we continue to meet this demand year round, and how can we get value out of more of this produce? So around '96, a guy out in Spring Green had a commercial kitchen that was under capacity. He only needed it certain months of the year, and even then, only certain hours, days a week. So he says, "I'd like to rent this out to other people." And what it really was the beginning of the idea of a community kitchen or a shared use kitchen. And that project, we got a little grant to help us explore it. We even got to as far along as doing interviews to hire a manager to manage this operation, and then it just kind of all fell apart. But another example of how failure, I guess the first example, how failure can lead to later, development is someone in Algoma, Wisconsin heard about this project up in Kewaunee County and wanted to ask me to come and talk, and I came up and gave a talk, and I actually dissuaded them from doing it. I said, I don't think it's going to work in a rural area. That's what I found in Spring Green. I think it needed to be in a city. And I heard other people say the same thing, and she said, I don't care, we went ahead and did it anyway. And for about 4 years, I helped her, and I brought June Holly in town. June Holly was out in Appalachia, really rural, but in the town of Athens, and she was on the cover of the Wall Street Journal at one point just before we invited her. We also brought someone from New York State and from Colorado, basically to bring them in and help Mary Pat, and also the growing number of other kitchens that started bubbling up wanting to do this. And then, that led to, Mary Pat's Kitchen closed a few years ago, but now there's 15 or 18 of them all around the state. And I popped into that whole movement off and on to sort of support it, sometimes with grants. This was just another project. Actually, once I was involved with one co-op, I said, well, we could support many. And we got a couple grants over time that allowed us to kind of just put out the word and said, the grants paid for technical assistance. So it kind of bought my time, it bought some resources, some travel dollars, and I was a coordinator of resources, and we...
You are the only participant in the conference. Please press any key on your keypad.
Yep, that's
in conference.
All right. And so we helped, I think, at one point we were helping like maybe 8 kind of co-op or co-op-like projects around the state. And so it paid for my time. That's when I was working at the Center for Cooperatives, so I was kind of steered towards working on co-ops. This is going a little further. I kind of felt like I had done a lot with small farms, and I wanted to kind of branch out into bigger problems and bigger issues. And in 2002, and this again was like a multi-year, this took years to get rolling, but in 2002, we got a grant, our USDA grant, and we wanted to find leaders in Wisconsin's commodity agriculture across all products. And so we sent out a survey through all the county offices, and so we were looking for three things: farmers who are commodity growers, so not small, not niche market, but commodity growers, innovative thinkers, and respected by their peers. And we got about 30-some nominees, and 26 of them all agreed to be part of a program for a year. And we brought them to Madison a couple times, and we went up north a couple times, and we met with them, and we, over time, and we got another little grant. Eventually, we followed a model that was in Iowa, and it was in other states, Kansas, of bringing farmers together to basically invest in good opportunities. It was kind of an angel, it became sort of an angel investment network for agriculture. And we had the money allowed us to do these conferences or big events. A lot of times grants can fund big events, new events. So we did this one in near Milwaukee. It drew 200 people, a lot of suits. We're looking to invest in some of these opportunities here. And so that led me to, I think that was part of what led me to go work for another organization under contract for a few years. It was called Thrive, which paid for 75% of my salary and allowed me to float some of my hard dollars onto another employee who continued the work, and we worked together. But then at one point the grant, or that relationship with Thrive just ended 6 months early. It was a really kind of desperate time, ready to sell the house kind of time. And then this opportunity came along. I think one thing I would say, you asked about partners, and clearly partners can make all the difference in a grant proposal. A grant came out, it came to me through Chris Whalen. It was just kind of Growing Power. If you've heard of Growing Power in Milwaukee, they were always looking for grants too, and they saw this one that only universities could go for. And so they sent it not to me, but to Chris. For some reason, she sent it to me. And I just thought, Will Allen, African-American leader, already famous, already on speaking terms with the president and the first lady, gigantic problem, food insecurity in American cities was how we focused on cities. And so thankfully I found a partner over at UW-Madison, not an extension integrated person, but Steve Ventura and Soils. And we worked like dogs for about 6 weeks, and we turned in a $5 million proposal, and 6 months later, to our surprise, we got it. So this changed my life in so many ways. It was a giant project to manage. We're hiring people left and right, and coordinating, cats. So it's academia. Everybody likes to be loose and free and do their own thing. No one really likes to be told what to do ever. So it's really about how do you manage people so that they can work on what they want to, and find a way to make this and to pull off what we promised. And luckily, what we promised was somewhat vague, so it gave us a lot of leeway. How much time do we have in this person?
We have an hour.
Okay, all right. So one of the things I say about why I like grants, I'm going to cheat and look ahead, is that it gets us working out of our silos for sure. I can't tell you, I've heard the word silos about 4,000 times in my 26 years working here. And we are still stuck in silos a lot of times. But grants force you out of them. You can't write a grant for very much money by yourself. So you're forced to partner with people that bring something you don't have. And often that even means leaving the university, or going to another university, or going to nonprofits, or going to the public sector, going to companies. So every grant I've ever had, for the most part, has involved a lot of collaborators and outside the silo. So I have never been in a silo. I can't be in a silo. But the other thing I like about him is it can, depending on what kind of grant you write, it can get us working with more diverse populations. And that's something I've heard for a long time in extension. We should be working with more diverse populations, serving everyone in Wisconsin. And grants are an amazing opportunity to do that, because grants are almost always about problems. The funder wants you to solve a problem and solve it better than anybody else who brings a strategy to the table. And so You know, the problem of food insecurity is huge. Poverty in our cities is huge. Racism in our cities and in our everywhere is huge. And this was a grant that was really being, you know, we really just promised to sort of dive in and try to tackle all of it. It was incredibly ambitious, but we worked all over the country, so grants can provide travel dollars. We went to Los Angeles. I'll just say where I went: Los Angeles once, Detroit 4 times, Chicago probably 15 times, Cedar Rapids twice, Madison. I live here. That was one of our cities, and I didn't make it to Boston, unfortunately, but I made it to Milwaukee probably 200 times. So I went to Milwaukee so much that I started thinking I was Milwaukeean, which became a problem. You know, someone has said, don't go native. You know, it was advice in the co-op development world. If you work with a co-op, you start a co-op, just remember you are the external partner, you are the facilitator. Do not go native. The problems happen, and occasionally forget that. So so Milwaukee was an amazing place to work, and I went there so many times because I loved going there. But I guess I won't unless there's questions later. I won't say any more about that project. It ended. I mean, this here, I'll say, is, if you can see it, and I can send you this if you don't have it. We kind of wanted to come up with a way that we could talk about the food system. It's a very, very complex thing. This simplifies it enormously. But on the right side is us trying to understand kind of the system itself and how it operates within the context of a larger environment of public policy, public health policy, public health issues, obesity, you know, the enormous number of public health issues facing our country and the cost associated, and how the food system plays a part of that. But on the left, what we started hearing we didn't initially think about putting values, so to speak, in this framework, but when we were working out in communities in all these cities, it was clear that the same kind of drivers, the same kind of values or goals were in every city. And you know, I'm really glad that the term local food is kind of passed a little bit. We think a little broader than that now. We kind of think of these food systems, and for the most part, people who work in them are trying to solve problems in them. They're trying to solve sustainable, environmental problems. They're trying to solve income to farmer problems, rural development problems, health problems, race-related problems, food justice. So there is, where there are problems, there are grant dollars to solve them. I focus on problems. That's where I focus on. So this framework's been helpful going forward. A couple of things that I learned about that led to new grants. So if you get these grants, and it enables you to develop your own capacity and more relationships. And number one, I never really worked on issues related to racism ever. I never worked on health so much. You know, I worked with small farms, I worked with bigger farms, I worked on marketing strategies, but this whole giant world of health. And I said it to Jed Colhoun the other day. There are grant opportunities if we just are not afraid to go to the intersection of health and agriculture. It's very controversial, but that is where problems lie, and that's where solutions lie. We can tweak agriculture and have an enormous impact on public health. And if we do it slow enough, no one has to lose their shorts. You know, I mean, we just need to think it through. It needs to be a strategy. So I think that there's huge grants in the future in that area. And the other thing that I kind of learned, or it really came out at the same time as our grant, is this whole idea of collective impact, which on the bell curve had its hype, and now it's on the down slide, and everyone's critical of it. But I was doing collective impact in 1992, in 1993, in 1994. I've always been doing collective impact. Suddenly, a little theory came along that put some words to it and structured it a little bit. And as people have said, collaboration's been around for millennia, but Americans aren't very good at it. Americans are independent cusses, are farmers and everybody else, and there's a strong competitive streak. Our economy is based on competition. But collaboration is not our strong suit, and yet that's how you solve problems. Getting out of silos and collaborating is how you solve problems. So you're swimming against the grain of American culture to work on collaboration, but it's where the grants are, if nothing else, and it's how you solve problems. And collective impact was helpful. And I would say 3 of the last 5 grants that I've worked on have been essentially for collective impact projects. And I never used the word collective impact in any of the proposals. I didn't use any of the jargon of the 5 conditions, but they're basically collective impact projects. Anyway, this is a current project. It's a collective impact project. It's focused in Milwaukee. I like this picture because Melissa, and I just love the way everyone's honed in on her. She's the leader, really, in a lot of ways. She's a startup entrepreneur. She's been running a business for, I don't know, maybe 3-4 years. She basically hauls food waste. So it's not the most, lovely experience probably, but someone's got to do it. And she now has 3 trucks, and she goes around the city of Milwaukee and she collects food waste from beer makers, coffee shops, grocery stores, and she got a contract with the city. Milwaukee and Madison are both doing pilot residential projects right now, where they're collecting from a rather small number of households food waste. And there are a lot of ways to deal with food waste, and this is, again, we're having a view of things really helps, and the EPA has a great way of looking at it. It's a hierarchy. I'll draw it there. Where if there's food waste, number one, it's a big problem. It fills our landfills too quickly. As soon as you fill one, you got to build a new. You got to locate a new one. Who wants one in their backyard? No one. So, and also, if you believe in climate change, food waste in a landfill produces, methane, a rather large amount of methane, and according to scientists, it's 20 times worse than CO2 in terms of its impact on the environment. So, in terms of impact on climate, ultimately. So, but there's many problems, or there's many solutions, and they say the first one is to divert that food waste to people, who need food, and that could include getting it processed into products that can last longer, because a tomato only lasts so long as a tomato. Getting it to animals, if we can't eat it, maybe animals can. And a lot of this happens already. Another level you can go, there's industrial uses. This food waste has a lot of chemicals in it, properties in it that can be used in other things, including generating energy. And a third or fourth is composting. And then the 5th choice is, okay, after all that fails, take it to the landfill. So we're focusing just on that composting level, and we said to the USDA that we were going to take food waste, we're going to expand the system in Milwaukee through a collaborative approach, citywide, of collecting more food waste, getting it processed, and then taking that final product, that compost, and getting it into 10 zip codes in the city, low-income zip codes in the city that have absolutely deteriorated soil. They can't grow food in it if they wanted to, and so they need to build and improve their soil. Either in backyard gardens, community gardens, or small urban farms. So that's what that project's trying to do. And it involves, the DNR is involved, the Department of Public Works in Milwaukee is involved, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District is involved. So that's 3 public agencies. We have UW Milwaukee is a great partner in this project with bringing 3 faculty, or two faculty, 1 academic staff, and some students. Madison is a great partner in this. Extension is the lead, and we've got a bunch of nonprofit partners. We've got several companies that are involved in terms of composting food waste. So it's just, this is what is getting funding these days. Collaborative projects, multi-sector, systems approaches to problems. That's what's getting funded. So this is something that I've more pursued a little bit more out of my own personal interest or passion. As I got exposed to and learned to work with different cultures, I saw, there's differences in how we work with different cultures, but a lot of the same goals. And this is Will Green on the far left. He's really totally a rising star in Madison. An amazing man. He's been running Mentoring Positives for I think 12 or 13 years in Madison. He works with African American youth almost exclusively on the east side. He gets them started with basketball, and then someone he calls him a white activist. A white activist came along and introduced and then said, "Listen, I see you're growing some tomatoes."
To the conference, please press any key on your keypad To remain in conference.
Someone came to Will maybe 6-7 years ago. They said, why don't you take some of those tomatoes you're growing with your kids and turn them into a salsa? They worked on that. They turned it into salsa. Coincidentally, he's now getting that salsa processed by the same woman I met way back, not June Holly, but that woman in Algoma who called me up to get a kitchen started. Well, that kitchen eventually closed. There's another one in Green Bay. There's another one being developed up in, I think, Sister Bay. So she is making his salsa. But I went to him about 2 years ago and I says, well, you got a salsa, it's in the grocery stores, you're starting to get some publicity for this. Would you consider doing another product? And he asked, what? I said, I think frozen pizza I think there's something we can do with frozen pizza. So this was a case, I always bring my own ideas to projects. You have to start with some idea, and then you get feedback and you improve it and improve it. This is probably one where I really brought it. I was really ready to run with this. I've been kind of investigating the pizza market as a consumer and as a potential business for years. And I just saw a little opening. I think number one, there's no local frozen pizza, not many local frozen pizzas available. In Madison, having a pizza that's made by kids, made by youth, African-American youth, there's a great story there. But what we really try to do, and Will's gone along with this so far, is just making it a healthy pizza, which is a word that I've been told not to use sometimes. It's a very loosey-goose word, but and you got to be really careful about what you put on a label, but at least in terms of talking to our initial partners, we kind of call it a healthy frozen pizza. We may eventually put meat on it, but there's additional regulatory hurdles for meat and cost. So it's just laden with vegetables. And our goal is to have that be Wisconsin grown vegetables. So we're trying to develop a product that's kind of hitting every hot topic there is. Plant-based diets, it is a giant trend right now. I think it's up and coming. And so having a vegetable-based pizza product with a wheat crust is what we're working on. And so this was the case, though, over this past year. I helped them write one grant to the city of Madison for $5,000. That enabled them to develop 200. They'd already kind of worked out a recipe, and we've got tons of help from students, from faculty on this campus, food science department, from Madison College culinary department, from local pizza maker restaurants. We got a ton of help. When you work with an audience like this, when you work with a partner like this, they attract resources that you can't. So Will Green is well connected, and then I had attracted resources that he can't. So he can't reach over and get space in the food science lab like I can. But then more recently, I helped him write a grant, and it turned into an all-nighter. Literally like 5:30 in the morning, I finally went to sleep on the couch at my house, and my colleague, Donnell Richards, kept working. 7:30, I wake up, he'd got it all entered in, and we turned this grant in, and we took over to Will, and he signed it. And he was working with us at 3 a.m., he was sending us messages, his wife was working with us. So this is a grant that Extension won't get a single penny. It wasn't appropriate for us to ask for money in this grant, but it's kind of a larger strategy. Each grant shouldn't stand by itself. It should be a body of a larger strategy. And for me, the stronger Will Green is, the stronger that some of my other strategies will be. So two things that I'm working on these days is diversifying the food and ag industry. So, small task, but how can we get more people of color into the good paying jobs in the food industry? There's a lot of great jobs in the industry, and there are shortages. They're not finding employees. So there are companies out in rural Wisconsin, there are companies in Madison and Milwaukee and our cities that can't fill positions because there's not enough people interested, not enough young people coming out of college interested in going into the field of food and agriculture. So one of our goals is to work with, promising, kind of exceptional students in our communities of color, and also with, struggling students, which is more who will work with both. That's the nice thing is Will works with both. So anyway, that's all my pictures. This is just my ideas of why I like grants. So I like grants because they're designed to solve problems. I'm very much into solving problems. It's kind of just in my psyche. And they support innovation, but they also reduce risk. So if you want to do a conference, and no one's ever done this kind of conference before, if you can work that conference into a part of a grant, you know, you're not going to find too many grants that will just fund a conference, but how do you go for a bigger grant, a little bigger, and then you put in the conference you know needs to happen in order for everything else to get rolling. And I've had probably, I don't know, I've been involved with starting probably 6 or 7 or 8 different types of conferences in the state, usually with grant subsidies to roll. And so that grant is a subsidy. It reduces the risk, and all these things reduce the risk and help you get things going when it's new and innovative. It can get us working with diverse populations. That assumes you kind of reach out to them, and that is not easy, and it takes trial and error. They create work plans to get things done. I think that we have a propensity sometimes to think things to death and talk things to death. But when you write a grant, it's actually what are we going to do? The funder will not pay anyone to think about stuff very long. You know, at least not the grants I go for. End goals and measure success are always defined, so we know we have a lot of strength in evaluation program development in our institution extension, and we know that you need to define your goals. We know you need measures to track those goals, and the funder demands that. So you cannot earn a grant without that. I like that roles are really defined, and increasingly my work, even if the funder doesn't ask for it, I have a work plan that's usually month by month in a 2-year grant. We know what we're doing every single month. And when they do ask, even if they don't ask for it, I can provide it so that they see that we really thought this through. And the roles are clearly defined. And the bigger these things are, I mean, I've got a lot of projects. The compost project has 45 or 50 collaborators right now. Many people are just doing a small amount of contribution, and others are doing a little more, but it's defined going into it, who's going to do what. And there's decision making. So if nothing else, there's a PI, a principal investigator, or whoever the name is at the top of the grant, and they're going to have some authority over, if someone's not working, not doing what they said they do, there's at least some authority that you can pull those funds and put them on someone else. And you can design that decision-making authority however makes sense, and you can leave it a little loose and let it evolve over time. So you're going to need to make decisions. You don't want to, if you're the manager or the PI, you don't want to make all the decisions. You want to keep that collaborative thing going. Big people are very busy. So I'll talk about it later, but just using the tools we have right now to do video meetings, to use Google Docs, that's become so huge in all my work, is you can collaboratively write a grant, you can collaboratively develop a budget, and then throughout the course of the grant, you can use those same tools to keep moving forward. The deadline forces you to pull it all together, so we all need deadlines, otherwise it just keeps procrastinating it out further. So if fully funded, there are resources to pull off the grant. Of course, sometimes they cut the funding, they give you less than you asked for. Then it's your job to kind of cut back what you'll do. And the work plan budget can be adapted, so as you go, which is great. There's always like a 10% leeway usually that you can actually just make budget changes without even asking the funder. That's helpful because a budget and a grant proposal is just it's a plan that then hits reality, and you got to be able to adjust a little bit. And that's a management thing. And opportunities. So you never know what's going to come up. This SARE grant, it suddenly popped up kind of in the middle of the program that MMSD, the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, was willing to purchase some compost. The compost system is a throughput system. Food waste goes in, it gets processed into compost, and then it needs to go out. And it needs to get bought, and it needs to pay for everything that happened before then, one way or another. And if it gets stuck, if you can't get rid of it, then the food waste starts piling up. Or you just have to turn away those people that are bringing food waste. Now you've just lost a customer because they're like, well, I have food waste every week, and you just turned me away. Goodbye. I need a solution I can trust. So when MMSD came along and says we'd be willing on a pilot basis to buy compost to put on people's lawns, to soak up rainwater, all these systems, how is food waste connected to the lake, Lake Michigan? It's connected because if you can turn food waste into compost and then spread that compost on lawns, you can take the drain pipes off of homes in the central city of Milwaukee, take off those drain pipes because they're going straight into the sewage system. Rain is hitting the roof and it's going straight down the pipe, down into the sewage system, which in big floods, in these combined systems, these boulder sewage systems, overflows, and they have no choice but to dump sewage into Lake Michigan. So we had an opportunity to jump in, if we were willing, and sort of manage the process of identifying households who would be interested in receiving free compost if they're willing to mow their lawn properly, water it properly, seed it, overseed it in the fall, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're in the middle of that right now. It was not part of the grant. We're doing it because it seems like it could actually get the other things going. So grants are great that you can be adaptive. And then just the fact that grants end. So not just that the money runs out, but this amazing team that you've assembled suddenly just kind of falls apart. And that's what happened with that AFRI grant. We had $5 million. We had a team of amazing people, grad students and faculty and everything else. And now it's done. The webpage that we decided that we developed is just sitting there with no one to manage it. So that's an unfortunate thing, but it's just reality. What I don't like is, it is so much work to put a grant together. It is mind-bogglingly hard. It's unhealthy to put a grant together. It's not just an overnighter the last day. It's kind of 2 months, because to write grants, it's not like all your other work just kind of goes away and you can kind of just work on a grant. You're doing everything else. So the best you can do is is try to divvy out portions of it to partners and colleagues and staff, and just plan way ahead. Like, I don't go for a grant if I don't have a 2-month window. If I look at a grant and it's due in 6 weeks, I don't go for it, unless it's really tiny. But it's hard work. The deadline, the whole thing is stressful. It's an extremely stressful process, and you're asking people for things. If you're the person leading it, you're constantly just bugging people, and you become you become somewhat annoying to them. So that's your position, and but it's stressful for them too, because they're busy. So it's stressful. The whole thing is hard work, and then it all might be for naught. You go all that work, and I just got word back that we didn't get a grant. It was due in April, I think, March, and we didn't get it. It was with Kendra Alexandra over at Sohi was the lead PI. It was a great grant. I thought it was an A+. I really thought we turned in an A+ grant, and we didn't get it. And I haven't heard why. I don't know what the reason was. But you can't worry about that when you're writing it. You just have to be confident. You have to be passionate. You have to believe in what you're writing and doing, or don't go for it. If you're So I think my success rate in grants is largely because I carefully pick which ones I go for. And then if funded, some staff or partners don't perform as promised, and that definitely comes up every single time you have a grant that has partners or staff. And so you become a manager. You become a manager of people you can't really control. It really has got to be a bad situation by the time you actually take money away from someone or from an institution, give it to someone else. So in the meantime, you're begging and you're playing nice as you can, and occasionally you have to get a little frustrated. But it's just that's true everything. That's just work. That's just what life is. And then just sometimes it's good when a grant ends. You're kind of done with that. You can move on to the next thing. So. All right, so these are some tips, and I would say the only one that really I would emphasize more than anyone else is this first one. I really feel like I don't know, maybe everyone does this, but it takes years to develop a strategy. It can be in your own head, but that's not very useful. You've got to go out there and pitch it to people, get their feedback, tweak it, and eventually it becomes a collaborative strategy. And then the funding appears. I never ever worry about funding. I focus on developing a strategy, because if it's a good strategy, the funds will appear. The grant opportunity will appear. If you've chosen a real problem and you come up with a good strategy, do not worry. You will be writing a grant soon. And I don't go looking for grants. You know, you guys send around these notices, and there's so many grants out there, and they kind of just come when you're ready for one that they appear. And there's some obvious places you go to look, like USDA, but for the most part, they come, they arrive. The one place I haven't looked much, and I think it's a whole area I'd like to, is foundations. You know, I think Extension maybe needs to come up with a more strategic, aggressive plan to look out there at what foundations are out there. I believe Madison does it. You know, I think UW-Madison does it. I talked with, I'm going to space her name right now, Kathy, who's the director currently of the, oh goodness, I forget. She wrote this, she's famous for her work in looking at the divide between rural Wisconsin and Kathy Kramer. I met with her for 2 hours on the terrace the other day, this summer, and just exploratory, seeing if we had ideas in common. It could be a grant or something 3 years from now. But she's talked about, I think it was the Ford Foundation, you know. I don't know who in Extension is really looking at that kind of thing, but I think it's huge, a huge opportunity. And I'll say more about why in a little bit. Anyway, in terms of, you know, read the RFP. Usually I read it 3 times. I look at it quickly and I just zero in on when's it due, how much is the money, is match required, who's eligible, these basic things. And half the time that rules out the grant. Just quick, it takes about an hour to rule out a grant. And then I read it super carefully. I take a pen and a highlighter, and it's just covered, every single page. And then kind of going back the 3rd time and really kind of absorbing the whole thing. So doing all that takes several days. Call the funder. Just like when I was in college, I don't think I ever had a class where I didn't go and sit down and meet the professor early. Get into that person's head. What do they want? You know, and this is the same thing. Call that funder up. Say, here's the strategy we've been working on for 3 years. What do you think? Is it a good fit for this grant? Because they can tell you no, and then you've saved a bunch of time. Communicate with your partners constantly, because now you've had these, you've had conversations going with some partners for a while, so they're not surprised you're coming to them, but you're also kind of pulling in brand new people. So video conferencing, I use GoToMeeting, has become crucial, not just when you have partners in other states, but when you have partners on other sides of campus who don't want to haul across, who have time. And then Google Drive, as I said, not for budgets, for drafting narratives, and for PowerPoint presentations. Lately, when you get these partners to the table to hear about, okay, grant's due in 6 weeks, I want to show you what we're thinking. The Google Slides is great for that. Let's see, and you can send up the link and then work on it right until the minute it's ready. Promise to deliver giant, big impacts. So you don't get funded for doing mediocre things. You get funded for doing unbelievable things, And it's got to be just believable enough. You've got to write that work plan and your budget to back up everything you said you do. And then I'm just going to throw this in here. I've just been learning lately how much, I've worked with students forever. I've hired students, I don't even know how many students I've hired over the years. And then almost without exception, they've been great. But I started learning 2 years ago that when I was in college, only the real ambitious people went out and volunteered for stuff, and were still building their resume and did service learning and all this. Now you have to. I don't think you can get many degrees without doing that kind of thing. And a lot of senior projects are really in the real world. They're trying to push it out in the real world. It's wonderful. And I started realizing that that's a bunch of soldiers. All those students are soldiers who can work for the cause. All you got to do is find the right professor. And a lot of professors are they don't want money necessarily, at least not the tiny bit you can maybe slice off and give them. They don't want to produce a paper out of this, but they're really dedicated to education and giving their students a good experience. And some of them have designed their whole courses around that. So Alfonso Morales, he puts students in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. John Schutzke over in biological systems engineering as a course that he took over. It's been around for years. It lasts through the spring and fall, so it's kind of a senior project, and it's engineers who have to get out there and work in the real world. The SARE project, the compost project I'm working with, has had 50 students working on it already in 8 different classes, 2 of which weren't even originally in the design of our proposal. They just kind of emerged later. So, and that's where I would just say that Extension has, I think, a unique opportunity. We've always been tied super closely to UW-Madison. We've got most of our integrated staff over there. We've got some staff at River Falls, so we're connected there. We've got some staff at Platteville, so we're connected there. We are not connected to Milwaukee, biggest city in the state. What's Extension's relationship with UW-Milwaukee? I would say almost nothing. And it's part of this because maybe they don't want us to. And there is a Milwaukee-Madison divide that's gigantic. But we should have a relationship with UW-Milwaukee, with UW-Stout, with all of them. And one way to do that is to work in their students and find faculty who you can work in their students. And I think that's Extension's unique position in this system, is we are not UW-Madison going and asking, oh, come on, other colleges, come along with us. We are sort of separate. We can be a neutral, sort of a neutral player, and we can manage grants. We have the capacity here to manage large grants. So listening to your grant support people, Chris Whalen, sometimes I resist because she's so darn particular, but she's only doing her job. She's been through this many times. Listen to everything she says, do everything she says, do everything that Suzanne says. And then if you're working with these other colleges, basically they all have the same kind of people, and you've got to work with them. So you have to have patience to work with these people who are in these, I kind of call it bureaucracy, but it's an essential bureaucracy. And then I guess the last thing is, if you get funded, you got to do what you promise. So if you just get that grant and kind of, yeah, that's great, and move on and start writing another grant, and you don't have the capacity in place to actually. I've seen that happen with partners. So, the work only begins once you get the grant, and it's like, right now we really have to work. So, and leaving time to write the next grant. So, anyway, that was a lot.
Yeah, that was great. I have a few questions, but if anybody in here or watching on their computer, if you have questions, please email me, and you can just go ahead and shout them out if you have any. And I'll check my email when I'm done with my questions to follow up with you a little more. Let's see, you have applied to a multitude of federal agencies, including NIFA, the EDA, the Department of Labor, and DHHS. What can you tell us about the nuances applying to the different agencies?
Well, I was going to correct that,
Oh, okay.
and I didn't have a chance. I don't think I've ever applied to the Department of Labor.
Okay.
Kendra Alexander is very, very familiar with the Department of Labor, so she's a good partner if you're going for that. And I don't think I've gone for DHHS. I might have. I don't know. I've gone for state grants, a lot of USDA grants, a couple Economic Development Administration grants, and then USDA has just so many different grants programs. So it's mostly so it's not been so many as you say, but I don't know. In some ways, they're all the same. I go for grants. I could go for grants that are very well designed. I was just involved with a City of Madison grant, so that was a new thing for me. I don't know. I think they all want to see a well-defined work plan. I see more similarity than difference. I always make that phone call and talk with the person at the top. I don't know. I think one reason we didn't get this SPECA grant with Kendra Alexander is I wasn't as familiar with that. When I tried to get review panel, we weren't ready, and I asked them if I applied to be on the review panel so I could fly to Washington, read everyone else's proposals, learn how it works. And unfortunately, they never even got back to me. So I think if you're going into an unfamiliar agency, that you're really at a disadvantage. You really need a partner on your team who's been in that agency. So Kendra with Department of Labor. I would really like to get an NIH grant. I've never gotten one. I'm not going to go in there on my own. I need people who have gotten those before. But this, like I said, this intersection of ag and health, gigantic. To me, it's like the #1 thing we should be working on in agriculture right now is that. Steering, sustainability is important. Feeding, whatever, 9 billion people is critical. We're going to get there one way or another, but changing the system so that it has healthier outcomes is, I think, maybe the number one issue. So NIH.
That's what you want. So what's the best feedback or constructive criticism you've received from an unfunded proposal?
I haven't gotten that much. I mean, usually these people that run these grant programs are totally overburdened. You know, the woman that I was working with on my last grant was managing several other grant programs. You know, I think they've been increasingly thin staffed. So getting back to every single proposal and here's a bunch of advice for how you can improve it, a lot of them don't.
Okay.
So some of them promise it, so I am hoping somebody to hear why we didn't get that SPECA grant.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So most of your grants are highly collaborative, and I think you said you have 50 partners on one of your grants. How do you find your partners? Do they find you, or is it just through networking?
You know, I'm a very networky person. So I'm a people person. I like to meet people and find out what they're doing. To me, the best way to do that is one-on-one over a coffee or in groups with some beer. You know, you really just get to know someone. What do you do? What are you passionate about? So I'm just always meeting people, and I always meet people, and I think, well, you know, how could we work together someday? Is there some way that we could work together on something? So I'm just doing that constantly. I know a lot of people, and I've stayed in the same institution all these years, and you know, you have a system. Even when I was at Madison, I was funded by Extension, so I've been going to on-rate conferences since 1995. I've never missed one, I don't think. So you get to know a lot of people. You do. I think you got to kind of go and call. You got to just go visit them. You got to get a call if they're higher up and there's some agency person higher up, and you just got to be bold and go and sit down and talk to them. Say, I want to learn about this grant program you have, you know, or I have some ideas around a strategy. I'd like your feedback. You know, be bold.
All right. So you called grant administrators bureaucracy. What do you wish OES or UWEX administration knew about the program side of sponsored funding? So what do you wish people like me knew about
Knew about what?
Knew about what it's like on your side of grant funding. What frustrates you? What do you like? What kind of support do you wish was there?
Well, I mean, this is going to sound extremely self-serving, but I think we need to support the salaries of people who work on grants more. I mean, in my case, now that I'm going into communities where, you know, say low-income communities, if they're gonna, you know, they're very suspicious and cynical about the system. And so they see you coming in and they see that you're proposing a grant and they kind of see your angle and maybe to get some of your own salary covered. You know, it just puts you in a difficult position. Going into Milwaukee, period, as a white Madison guy, as a Madison person, period, going into Milwaukee, you're at a disadvantage immediately. If you can go into Milwaukee and say, you know, I don't want a penny, but I'm willing to collaborate and be a facilitator and pulling together a grant that could get some money for multiple institutions. I think it would strengthen our hand so much. So God, that's my number one thing. And I mean, and I don't know. I think otherwise, you keep funding Chris Whalen, you know, and Suzanne. You know, and it's not all. You know, it's not the only part of the bureaucracy you have to work with. Once you start developing a grant, you know, sometimes you have to deal with HR questions. You know, you have to deal with purchasing questions. Chris is really great. You know, you can't put things in, oh, I'm going to buy this for the grant. But not only does she tell you you need more detail, but you got to go and find out, well, can I purchase that? You know, so you know, I'm lucky I'm in this building, you know, because I can just go up different floors and I can meet HR, purchasing, you know, business services, etc. Other people who are outstate in counties or whatever, they don't have that advantage. So I don't know how you could do it. I think technology like this, I use GoToMeeting. You can have, you know, up to 5 people on a screen on the one I pay for, you know, service I pay for. I think we need to see these people, you know. And I don't know, maybe many people wouldn't want to go and sit down for that, but I don't know, I think we need to meet these people and that they're human beings and that they are really capable. and that they're there to help you, you know. So I know when I was first writing grants, I just felt like the bureaucracy was nothing but making my life difficult. I was over at UW-Madison at that time, and I think at that time in the College of Ag, it was kind of difficult. They certainly didn't care about the little $10,000 grants I was bringing to them. I was not a faculty, so I kind of felt lower class, like a lower class citizen. I never felt that they were very helpful. And then I came here in 2008, and I have just been extremely impressed. I think everyone that I work with in the entire, that whole level of people that are basically supporting the systems have been great to work with. So I don't know how you get people to know that, but I would just definitely say people don't think of them as your enemy as you're going into this grant. That's why you need 2 months though, you know, and be patient with them. Don't tick any of them off, because then the next time you go write for a grant, they're going to be less helpful. They're human. They're going to be like, I'm not going to return that phone call.
I'm going to check my email, see if anyone has any questions. Not through email. Do you have any questions?
No.
No. All right. I think that'll do it. We are almost at the hour, so that was perfect.
Well,
Thank you so much, Greg. And we'll see you next month.
Oh, it's fun to think about it for a few days.
Well, that's down.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I think it's